Good afternoon. My name is Cristina Mora, and I am the co-director of the Institute of Governmental Studies and a professor of sociology here at UC Berkeley. On behalf of myself and IGS co-director, Professor Eric Schickler, who you will hear from later in the program, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the IGS Centennial Boxer Lecture, which is jointly sponsored with the Bancroft Library. The Barbara Boxer Lecture Series is an annual event focusing on women in leadership that was launched in 2017, which was also the year that the Senator Boxer donated her congressional papers to be archived with the Bancroft Library. Now, as Americans navigate the health, economic, and social crises caused by a global pandemic, as we prepare for a divisive 2020 election, and as we grapple with racial inequality, how are women leaders charting a path forward? This is a question at the center of today's event. To help answer it, we are honored to have with us today two transformational women leaders, Senator Barbara Boxer and Representative Karen Bass. Both have dedicated their lives to public service and have been forceful advocates for racial, gender, and economic justice in California and the United States. Now, the first part of today's event will be a conversation between Senator Boxer and Representative Bass on the topic of women's leadership during these challenging times. We will also reserve time for questions from the audience, which I will moderate later. But before we begin, I would like to introduce another inspirational leader, UC Berkeley's Chancellor, Carol Christ. She is steadfastly guiding the university during these unprecedented times, and we are so grateful for her leadership and especially for her support and unwavering commitments to diversity and inclusion in these challenging times. Thank you, Chancellor, for being here today.
Thank you, Christina. I'm delighted to welcome everyone to today's event, which celebrates women's leadership and also marks an important milestone in the 100-year history of the Institute for Governmental Studies. One of the oldest organized research units in the UC system and the first public policy research center in the state, IGS has been at the forefront of American and California politics research, bringing the research expertise of the university to bear on society's biggest problems. It's the mission of the IGS to help our community and the nation gain a greater understanding of politics and policy at the local, state, and national level, and to nurture and prepare the next generation of political leaders and engaged citizens who will determine the future of American democracy. By creating opportunities for students to bridge across political identities and cultural divides, IGS helps to serve as a counterforce to the increasing polarization that dominates American politics today. I congratulate Christina and Eric and the members of the IGS community for reaching this milestone and for maintaining a legacy of excellence through various research initiatives, a statewide poll that has gained national recognition, programs that provide training and support to undergraduate and graduate students, and seminars and colloquia like this one that bring together diverse audiences to reflect on critical issues facing our state and our nation. It's now my honor to introduce Senator Barbara Boxer, who will introduce Representative Karen Bass. Before I tell you about her many contributions as a public servant, I want to mention that she's also the proud parent of a UC Berkeley alum, Doug Boxer, who graduated from Berkeley in 1988. Barbara Boxer represented Marin and Sonoma counties in the House of Representatives from 1983 to 1992. 29 years ago, then Representative Boxer led a delegation of female representatives in a march up the Senate stairs to demand that the all-male Senate Judiciary Committee give Anita Hill the opportunity to testify during the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings. Boxer's leadership in this fight inspired many women to run for office, helping to gradually transform the US Congress from the men's club that it had been for its first 2 centuries. Senator Boxer's willingness to stand up for groups that have historically been shut out of the process continued to mark her service in Washington. Elected to the Senate in 1992, she distinguished herself as a forceful defender of voting rights and an advocate for protecting families, children, consumers, and the environment. Senator Boxer's accomplishments in Washington are many. She wrote landmark legislation, establishing the first federal funding for after-school programs. She's been a steadfast advocate for making college more affordable. Senator Boxer also co-authored the Violence Against Women Act, and the senator worked tirelessly as a leader on the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works to defend our environmental laws, prevent California's coast from offshore oil drilling, and address climate change. Finally, it's important to note that Senator Boxer was an early opponent of the war in Iraq. After 24 years, Barbara Boxer retired from the Senate in 2016, but she continues to inspire new women leaders, and the people of the state of California are grateful to her for her exceptional service to the state and the country. Please join me in warmly welcoming the Honorable Senator Barbara Boxer.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. I am so honored that you are here with us today. It means a lot to me. And I couldn't be more proud to have my congressional and my Senate papers housed at UC Berkeley. What an amazing institution. And yes, my son got an amazing education there, went on to law school, and he's still a big supporter of the university, as we all are. And also, as part of my agreement with the university, we decided to have this Barbara Boxer lecture once a year, and to highlight up-and-coming fabulous women who are making their mark in politics. And that leads me to Karen Bass, a wonderful congresswoman from the Los Angeles area. This has been quite a year, and she has been a strong voice for everything good. Karen, I now see you. I'm so happy. We're both wearing blue. That's good. I want to read you a little bit from her biography. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there's wonderful parts of it. So Congressmember Karen Bass is in her 5th term representing the 37th Congressional District. She serves on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs as the chair of the Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations. She also serves on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressmember Bass also serves as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, an extraordinary achievement for an extraordinary human being. But I want to tell you a little bit that before Congresswoman decided to run for office, she had a great interest in healthcare. And she got a degree so that she could be a physician's assistant. And she used that to really help her community. But I also want to tell you that when she ran for office, she eventually made history in the California Assembly because she was elected to be its 67th speaker, catapulting her to become the first African-American woman in US history, to serve in this powerful state legislative role. And she worked so hard during the Great Recession. It was, Karen, I call you that, you call me Barbara. I can't, when I'm interviewing you, I can't be too formal. Karen, your leadership during that time, I remember so well what was going on in California and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that were being lost. And of course, what we're seeing today is also very, very frightening. But I want you to know, I say to the students that leadership she exhibited during this Great Recession, she was awarded the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award. And that was in 2010, really pretty extraordinary. So Karen, we have about 30 minutes, I think, for our questions. And The way we're going to do it is I'll ask you a few, and then Christina will tell me when it's time for the students' questions, and she'll give us both those questions. So let me start off with a real open-ended question for you. If you were to describe the state of the nation today, what would you say?
Oh, wow. Chaotic, fearful. I think that none of us in our lifetime could have ever envisioned that we would be going through what we're going through now. Fearful because of the pandemic, fearful because of the unknown. We have no idea how long it's going to last. Chaotic because of the leadership at the top.
That says it for sure. And when we talk about the pandemic for a moment, given your incredible background in community healthcare and also your position on foreign relations, global health, we have never seen a president handle a pandemic like this. And I just wonder what your thoughts are and how you feel about this and what the Democrats were trying to do as this president ignored this and handed it off to 50 governors. Just give us your general feeling about it.
Well, my general feeling, and I know that you will relate to this because you were there, you went through Ebola. We saw how a pandemic could be stopped in its tracks because we could have had a pandemic. Ebola didn't even spread throughout Africa, but because we had the right leadership at the time, President Obama and Vice President Biden mobilized the entire world and they stopped it. And I think, every day I think about the 200,000 plus souls that are gone. And we have a leader at the top who says it's no big deal. You should congratulate me because it's not millions of people. Mm-hmm. And all of us now, I think, everybody knows someone who has either had COVID or who has died from COVID. I know a few people now. And I just feel so sad that knowing that this didn't have to happen the way that it has.
Karen, I'm really glad that you brought up Ebola because I was there watching in horror at this disease. It was we all remember how frightening it was. And I remember when the first 2 cases came into America, it was immediate by a grapple. Oh. It was immediate. And I remember because I see it before in my mind's eye, watching how they put people into isolation immediately. The doctors had all the PPEs. Mm-hmm. They tracked and they traced. And I want to ask you if you remember the day I remember when there were 15 cases in America. And I remember the number because President Trump stood outside, his helicopter like he always does, and he's yelling and he says, "Oh, there's only 15 cases. It's going to go down to 1 and then it's going to poof, disappear." Right. And I said to my husband at the time, I still have the same husband, but at the time, I said to my husband, I said, he doesn't want the stock market to crash.
Right.
And I would ask you as a health professional, if he had tracked and traced those 15 people, would we be where we are?
No. And I do think, different than Ebola, I do think it would have spread, but no way should there be 200,000. 7 million people have been infected in the country and over about 215,000 now have died. And my concern about everybody is that we kind of normalize and accept things. And we really should be horrified and outraged that so many people have died and that it just was not necessary. I understand he doesn't care about most people, but the fact that he doesn't care about his own supporters, that he constantly exposes people, and people do get sick after these rallies. One of his biggest supporters died, Herman Cain. Sure. I don't even think he mentioned his name after that.
No, he did not. And now he says he wants to kiss everybody.
Right.
Yes, I mean, we could go on this. Let's change course because my blood pressure won't handle this. As you are the chair of the Black Caucus, as I mentioned in the introduction, and the Black Caucus is playing an extraordinary role. It always has. I mean, I always supported the Black Caucus budget when I was in the House because it was always that humanity. You look, we can kill every man, woman, and child in the world with the defense budget 4 times over.
Right.
You know, what if it was once over and take all that extra money and spend it where we need to and invest it? But I want to talk about criminal justice reform. Every time we saw police brutality right on our TVs with these young people getting cut down because of police brutality, I don't know. I was transported back to the days of the civil rights movement when I was young, married with a baby at that time. And I thought of John Lewis, and I thought of you, Karen, and your job, because there you are, the chairman of the Black Caucus at this point. So tell us about your work on criminal justice reform, because you have the bill that is the main bill, which Mitch McConnell hasn't taken up. Tell us about how it was to put that together and how hard it was to get broad support for it.
Well, I've been involved in this issue about police brutality for many, many, many years. And we've seen so many videos, but we hadn't seen anything as horrific as the murder of George Floyd. There was no question about it, And so what we did with the bill, members of the Congressional Black Caucus for many, many years had been working on different pieces of legislation. But because of all of the folks out in the street, because of all of the outrage, not just in our country, but around the world, that gave us the momentum to put this bill together. And so we combined several different pieces. We look at accountability. We look at the structural problems for why police never are charged. The fact that they get immunity, the fact that the standard to prosecute an officer is so high, it's never met. And so we lowered the standard. The fact that there's 18,000 police departments around the country and there's no national standards. You go and have your hair done and your beautician has to be licensed and has to follow national standards, but the person with a gun does not. And so we pushed and got the bill through. We did get some Republican votes, but after the bill was done, and you'll appreciate this, a number of Republicans came up to me afterwards and said, I really want to work on this. I really want to work on this. And so I've been talking to them. The problem really has been now that the Supreme Court issue is on the table, that has sucked all of the oxygen out of getting anything done. Because until the election, basically the confirmation process is going to take up the next 21 days.
Well, it's a perfect segue to my next question. And I know everyone in America is seeing what's going on around the country. On the one hand, the magnificence of this huge turnout of voters in places like Georgia, in places like Texas, people waiting online. But it brings a tear to your eye when you hear that people have to stand online to exercise their vote, which is a right, for hours and hours and hours on end. And I just feel that you are so close to the whole Voting Rights Act issue and what the Supreme Court did. And so if you can share with us, what do you feel about this election? Where are they trying to do the most damage in terms of suppression? And how are we fighting back?
Let me also mention, since you mentioned that I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we really have to understand this election in the context of the world, because we as the United States go around the world promoting democracy, criticizing countries for how they carry out elections. I've been an election observer in a couple of African countries, and we're always telling them about how to have their election. Well, now everybody is looking at us saying, you know what? You don't have anything to tell us, because you have people that are going out of their way to cheat. And every day we're learning about something new. What about the voting boxes? I'm sure you saw that. how they were putting up fake boxes so people would drop their ballots in, and then they could choose whether or not they turned those ballots over. Having people wait 11 hours is what some of the wait is in the southern states. They've come up with new ways to do voter suppression. And I should say it's more like voter discouragement. I mean, who's going to stand in line for 11 hours? But hundreds of people are. And so we now have a huge turnout, more than has been in many, many, many elections. And so I'm actually very optimistic. I'm not sure how you're feeling, but I'm optimistic that we're going to know on November 3rd.
I am very optimistic too, but I also have post-traumatic stress. So I tend to say I'm optimistic, but I'm also going to see. Now, one of the really awful things that happened, when Joe Biden was in the Senate, he was a great steward of the Voting Rights Act, which, as you know, was passed originally and signed as law by Lyndon Johnson. And basically, just for the students, they probably know this, but I would say what was critical about that is in states where there had historically been denial of the vote to people of color, they set up a whole new way under the Voting Rights Act to get clearance if they wanted to change any rules that had to do with voting. But the Supreme Court, this one, threw out one of the titles of the law. And now these states are doing whatever the heck they want to do. Take Texas, Karen. Texas has one drop-off box per county in counties that takes hours to go from one end to the other. So have you discussed this with any of your colleagues, and especially the Democrats who I think care more about this?
Well, absolutely. And you remember we did get a good court ruling and then we didn't. And so that was why the Republicans have spent the last 3.5 years packing the court with over 200 confirmations of very young conservative judges. And so you mentioned Texas. In one of the counties, there's 4 million people. So can you imagine how 4 million people are going to, however many voters there are, that you're going to have one drop-off point? And so what that is really doing is that's forcing people to vote in person, which is forcing people to risk their lives. This is insanity.
This is insanity. And I think, it's important to note that the House did pass restoration of the Voting Rights Act, and Mitch McConnell, the self-described Grim Reaper, where bills go to die, refuses to do anything about it. It must be very frustrating for you, but I know you're the most optimistic person, and I think it is wonderful to see. I think about the year it's been. I think about the last 4 years and what it has meant for someone like you to see it with Nancy Pelosi's leadership, just do the most extraordinary legislating. And I would talk about the economics of the current moment. The House has passed a very important bill, passed it a long time ago, then passed another one, a little bit over $2 trillion to deal with this economy. And we have Trump playing games with it, and the Republicans don't care about it. And what is your take on the economy right now, where we are?
Well, I think, we are in a terrible position right now. And I think that if we don't do something soon, take my city, for example, my county in Los Angeles, on any given night, we have 50,000+ people sleeping under freeways and on streets. Now, we're getting ready to go into a massive eviction crisis because there was a moratorium on evictions and because renters as well as small apartment owners were given support. Well, when that goes away, people are going to be evicted. So the homeless crisis is going to get worse. The interesting thing is that the Republicans, for some reason that I can't figure out, they do not want to give money to states and cities. So Barbara, you mentioned the recession that we went through when I was in Sacramento. Well, the only reason California didn't go off the cliff was because when you were in the Senate and the other Californians were in the House, you made sure that we had supplemental money. And that's exactly what has to happen now. So here we have all these wildfires in California, and we don't have the money to fight the wildfires. And so when you hear the president say he wants to punish the blue states, number one, the idea that a president would view himself as president of a handful of states and not president of all 50 states is really something. You know, I want to go back to the Voting Rights Act for one quick minute, because I think it's important for the students to know that, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but this is the first time the Voting Rights Act has been so contentious. I mean, in the past, it was extended with bipartisan support, right? But this time, what'd you say?
I say we now know why. It's
Right.
called voter suppression, and they want it, right?
Right. They do not want everybody to have the right to vote. They really don't.
No, they only want to give you the right to vote if you vote for them.
Exactly.
And by the way, they don't want to fight for the votes of certain groups of people. Now, I want you to know, when I started out, because I'm a lot older than you, Karen, when I started out, honestly, the parties were not that far apart, and we were fighting. Believe me when I tell you, when I started in the 70s, that's when I started local government. The Republicans, we were fighting over who were the best environmentalists. Yes, it's hard to imagine who were the ones that were going to fight for women's rights. They were for the ERA, for goodness sakes. This all changed in the 80s as you were coming up. And when was your first race?
Oh, my first race was in 2004.
Oh, you were way later. But when I was coming up, this was a different Republican Party. And, you know, and the Democratic Party in history had been terrible on the race issue, as we all know. It was terrible times for us. Johnson changed all of it. And he says, I think we Democratic Party have lost the South forever. And he was right. But we're putting together the coalitions now, and we're on the right side of history.
Right.
I want to ask you about somebody special who I know you loved and who loved you, and who you worked with, and someone I adored when I was in the House and kept a relationship with afterwards, and that's John Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you could share with us any experiences you may have had with John, personal, political, social, just to give, because he's an icon, and I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, the thing about him that we all loved is that he was just so humble.
Right.
So humble. I mean, the world might have viewed him as an icon, but he never ever viewed himself that way, nor carried himself that way.
Right.
You know, and so as I got to know him, I called him Mr. Lewis. And as I got to know him,
You really did. You called him Mr. Lewis.
He said, Karen, would you please not call me that? Would you please call me John? I said, no, Mr. Lewis. I can't do that. but I mean, he was just such a beautiful soul. And I think, especially sometimes in politics, their heads get big. And you go and you sit next to someone who's changed the country. And that's not the way he views himself at all. And I think that's one of the most important things to learn from him.
I'm going to step in quickly. This is wonderful. This is as if we're all having a cup of coffee. It's just amazing to see you two. But I'll remind Senator Baksha that we have time for one more question for each of you, and then I'll come back with student questions.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Karen my last question. Since we're talking about icons, I'd like to talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg with you for a minute. Just so everyone knows, I love John Lewis like I can't like a brother. And I loved Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a mentor. Here she is. The doll. And I keep it next to my statue of Rosie the Riveter that I think Nancy gave me. I didn't give this to Berkeley in my papers. I kept her. So I think this whole thing, Ruth's passing, at the moment she passed, and her wish being, please wait till the next president. And this nominee who said, when Scalia died, Oh no, don't put up Merrick Garland because he was a conservative icon. Wait, you have to replace him with a conservative. But when our icon, the progressive icon, dies, it's fine to go with the Federalist Society and put on someone who we know has gone after the Chief Justice for supporting the Affordable Care Act. So I just want to get your feelings about what's going on, how you felt about Ruth, what's going on in your mind as you watch these hearings unfold, and what you're thinking about it.
Well, I mean, I think it's very frightening. I really, really do, because the composition of the court right now has the potential to impact us and impact everyone on this call for the next generation, if not more. And listening to the confirmation hearing today, and she's very skillful, but her basic beliefs of she is a strict constructionist. And she thinks that that the Constitution is supposed to be interpreted literally. So as an African American, you can imagine what that means to me. It's like, really? You don't think it evolves? So what does that mean for all the progress we've made? I think if anything, these years with Trump, one of the most important lessons for us is that even though we in time have accomplishments and make great social change like marriage equality and all of that, we have to understand that it's not always permanent. And so it means that we always have to stay involved, because issues that I thought were settled obviously aren't.
Right. So I'll finish this up and toss it to Christina with these words I'm going to read, which I often do when your point that nothing is forever and no progress lasts. And this is to the students. There was a song written in the 30s, and I'm not going to sing it, thank you, but I'm going to read you the words, and remember these words. And remember what Congresswoman Bass said about how the struggle continues. Freedom is a hard-won thing. You have to work for it, fight for it, day and night for it. And every generation's got to do it again.
Yeah, yeah.
And the students, you're the generation. So back to you, Christina.
Great, thank you so much. We've already got a healthy amount of questions, but first, a quick announcement. Our questions come from 3 different sources: from the registration for the event, from our live stream, and from our own Zoom Q&A. We'll try to sift through as many as we can. But remember, if you have a question right now for either of our speakers, please post it on the Q&A, or if you're watching on our live stream on YouTube, on the chat function. All right, so the first question, the combination of a couple of questions that were asked in the registration. What are the most salient challenges women political leaders face today? What advice do you have for the next generation of women in politics?
Well, I think Representative Bass should start off, because she's still in the arena, and I'm kind of looking at it from afar.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think I would twist it around a little bit and say, what are the opportunities? Because I really think that women have tremendous opportunities right now. I mean, the numbers of women that are in the House, the numbers of women that are in the Senate, I can't imagine what it was when you first got there, how many women were there. So I view it from opportunities. Now, in terms of challenges, I think one challenge women always have when they're running is the fundraising, and the fact that women as a general rule are underestimated. But what I've learned in life is to embrace the underestimation, because when people underestimate you, then you catch them by surprise. you catch them by surprise. But I think those are some of the challenges. And I'm sad to say that in 2020, it looks like we're gonna have to fight for our bodies all over again.
Well, I would agree with Representative Bass. I think that the opportunities are pretty open, wide open. It doesn't mean we're not going to face prejudice or questions they never ask a man, you know. But I will tell you, when I started out, oh my God, first, Karen, when I got to the House, there were 23 women in the House.
Oh.
How many women are in the House? It's about 25% now.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, we're well over 100.
Right. So there were 23 women, and most of them got there because their husbands kicked the bucket and they got elected on their name of their husband. Honestly, there were just a few of us who were there on our own steam. Pat Schroeder, myself, Geraldine Ferraro, Barbara Mikulski, Barbara Kennelly, a few of us. And it was quite an experience. And I'll start off by saying, we had to put together, and Karen, this would really interest you, a Women's Health Equity Act, because when we got to the House, all of the NIH trials were conducted on men who weighed 155 pounds, I'm not kidding, on average, and they never tested any pesticides or any kind of chemicals or anything on women, on vulnerable populations like people with AIDS. So the women got together and we got that through. But I will close with this. I'm sure that a lot of young women are asking these questions. My advice is, don't want to be something, want to do something. Meaning, don't say, oh, I just saw Karen Bass, I want to be a congresswoman. No, I want to go into politics because I can't take the fact that there's still racial prejudice, that they're separating families and all the other things that really touch your heart, or climate change, which I know young people are absolutely apoplectic about, as they should be, since we now have a Republican Party that doesn't believe in science. So just know the sky's the limit as far as I'm concerned. We now have, Kamala Harris, and I take full credit, since if I didn't quit, she would have gone to the Senate. So I take full credit. She's going to be, if everything goes the way the polls say, a heartbeat away. Yeah.
Great. So another question from the students. So imagine it's 2021 and there's a new Democratic president, Senate, and the House. What legislation would you prioritize towards healing the political and social divides between American citizens and help address challenges like Black Lives Matter?
Congresswoman, that's your question.
Sure. Well, first of all, the first thing that we have to do is COVID. And we have to do that because of the profound health and the profound economic consequences. Let me just take one piece of COVID that people might not be thinking about, and that's education. So on a college level, Zooming and all of that, we can adapt to. But just think about poor communities, elementary schools, where they might not have the technology, or the parents might be working day and night and might not be able to work. So we already have an achievement gap. That achievement gap is going to be huge, with literally students being out of school for a year. So definitely that. But one of the things that you mentioned in terms of bringing together, one of the things that we have to deal with is Citizens United, because Citizens United is what dumped all of the money into the elections and has really taken it out of our control. And then of course the Voting Rights Act and things like that. But I could go on and on. Criminal justice reform, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, yes, all that.
So there's no shortage of issues, and all of them as quickly as possible. Okay, here's a question. How would you recommend youth who are thinking about running for state legislature or the House of Representatives, how might they be able to fight for economic justice, especially around majoritarian policies such as a $15 minimum wage or single-payer health care?
You cut out, so I didn't hear.
I'll say it again. How would the youth right now thinking about running for office or going into politics, how would they forge a campaign around economic justice issues, especially those like the $15 minimum wage or single-payer health care?
Well, I'll start and then I'll kick it over to the Congresswoman. Look, that is a great platform to have. If you were to take a poll, people want at least a $15 minimum wage. Even that is frankly getting away from us. How do you live on that? So we need to get to a place where people can live. I remember I went to Australia a long time ago, And somebody said, this is so interesting. They said, don't give the cab driver a tip. I said, why? Well, they make $20 an hour. This was several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and they won't take it. They don't need it. They're so happy. And as we talked to them, Andrew Yang in his presidential campaign made a really good point about making people feel that they can actually live the life and not worry, and have something to look forward to. So, by the way, if you're a youth now and you want to run for office and your platform is economic justice, you are spot on. You have an issue that people care about, that you're passionate about. And I think it's a great way. And the way I would get started is go into a local, be a city council person. I was on the board of supervisors. Congresswoman was in the assembly. There's lots of opportunity.
Let me just add in too, is that you don't have to wait to run for office. One thing that exists now that didn't exist when I was young is that there's a variety of social justice organizations now that you can work with on a community level, gain wonderful community experience. And so you don't have to think about it from the point of view of running for office. And I love the way the senator described it. Don't talk about what you want to run for, talk about what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Looks like our students are on top of a lot of issues. There's a question now on what are your thoughts about today's ruling by the Supreme Court relating to the census count and reversing Judge Koh's order to continue counting? So generally on this, or census politics more broadly?
I'll start quickly and then I'll toss it. This is an outrage, another outrage coming from our Supreme Court. Look, we need to know, it's in the Constitution, a fair count of people. It's critical. And if we don't know who's living in each of our states and we don't know the general income levels and we don't know their needs, then the programs that we fund are not going to get to the right people. And we're not going to have enough representatives in the House. In the Senate, we know there's just 2, which is the way the founders did it. But in the House, it's critical. So this is an absolute outrage in the time of COVID to say we don't need any more time. But I'm going to kick it to Congresswoman Bass.
This is long-term voter suppression. That's what that's about, and resources. Because if you don't count people, then you're going to reduce the amount of representation they have. You're going to reduce the amount of resources that they have in a community. So I think it's just absolutely tragic. But, that decision was by some of those new judges.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. Is Representative Bass aware of any measures legislators or local municipalities are taking before the election to help protect communities of color from potential violence after the election? Given the possibility for retributive violence from white supremacists if the Biden-Harris ticket wins, or those who feel such violence is sanctioned if Trump wins, does Rep. Bass, as head of CBC, have any insights about measures that would protect vulnerable communities?
So let me mention that in the CBC, there's 54 members. Now there's 235 Democrats, and the CBC members happen to just be Democrats. There's a couple of Black Republicans who choose not to be a part of the CBC. But I can tell you in those 54 communities, people absolutely are looking at that. And in the Democratic caucus, we've talked about it. Now, for the first time ever, I will tell you that I'm worried about the backlash after the election. And I'm worried that Trump, because he says he's going to do this, is unleash thousands of people, some of them militias, some of the guys that you can't tell whether they're law enforcement or not, and that is specifically to intimidate voters. Now that happened in California before to specifically intimidate Latino voters in Orange County. And the idea that we would see that, and so I am very, very worried about it.
And if I could just chime in here, Trump has done more than a wink and a nod to the hate groups.
Yes.
Let's be clear. He had every opportunity, right, to say, I disown white supremacists, and he didn't do it, and he never does it, and he's constantly sending them signals, including, I want my people to go to the polls. Let me just say this. With all the havoc that we have with police brutality, we have police departments and sheriff's departments that are sworn to protect us. And I would hope at this moment, we have local government people who are in charge of our protection. It's not a national deal. I mean, that's all done by our local people. I would hope that local politicians are calling together the police and the sheriff's office to plan how they're going to protect us at the polls. There are very clear rules. There can be no intimidation at the polls, period, end of quote. It's in the law. And law enforcement, and you cannot get close to a person or get close to the polling booth. So there are rules that have to be enforced. And I would just hope that our people all across the country of goodwill are calling on their local electeds to protect them. It's as simple as that. This can't happen. And I'll get back to what Congresswoman Bass said, that she's gone all around the world to make sure that there are fair elections and to teach people how to do it. And here we sit, and we don't want our people dissuaded. That's why they're lining up now too, early, and good for them. And they should continue. Try to vote early if you can.
Great. Here's a question that speaks to our California roots. California seems to be turning the corner on many big challenges. Our state has recently embraced bilingual education, proposed reinstatement of property tax via Prop 15, and affirmative action via Prop 16. All of these issues are ones that California voters are grappling with. What does this say about the course as a whole that the nation might follow? How can California be a leader in promoting progressive reforms for the rest of the nation?
Congresswoman.
Well, I tell you, I am so proud of our state, and the ballot measures that you just mentioned, we will see. The other area where California has been leading the way is criminal justice reform. The climate change, oh my goodness, we are just leap years ahead of other places. And so it's just important for us to show, let's just take climate change, for example, because we have turned climate change and addressing climate change into whole new industries. And I remember when we passed the first bill in the assembly, and everybody, the world was going to fall apart, everything was going to be terrible. The one thing that I don't understand about climate deniers is the fact that it is jobs, it is new businesses, there's opportunities for entrepreneurs. And so I think we have to share that example, and we need to share it more.
And I will say this, California's always been the trendsetter and always has been on the cutting edge. And we're going to continue to do that. And despite whatever Trump may lob at us, we'd be the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world. So, and I would echo the climate change discussion. And because, Congresswoman Bass was part of that, I carried the climate change bill in the Senate, and because of the filibuster, we fell 6 votes short of 60, or we would have had a price on carbon. And that is what makes sense. However you do it, put a price on it, because it's destroying the planet. And, when you read the New York Times explanation of where we are and the scientists and its lengthy discussion, we're getting to the point where either we're going to have an unpleasant environment or an uninhabitable environment. There's a big difference. We're already at the unpleasant one. I mean, I'm sitting here in Southern California in Palm Springs, where it's supposed to be 92, and it's 106.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's have more triple digits than you can imagine. This is not weather, it's climate. And so that's an absolute fact. And I think the very diversity of our great state.
Yes.
Look at our electeds, look at what we look like. I often say when Joe said he was going to pick an African-American woman as his running mate, I was so happy. And people said, well, why did he say that? You know what? There's a reason behind it. It's so comforting to see that unity. It's so wonderful to see the future. to say, no, we're not going to just be the way we were. And, you know, when Trump says, make America great again, what does he really mean? I mean, we could spend all day with that. It reminds me of when the Congresswoman said, when you're an originalist and you think back to when the Constitution was written, and they said, I think they said slaves were 3/5 of a human.
Yes.
That time, right?
Yes.
And women didn't get the right to vote for a very long time. This is the 100th anniversary, and I think it's important for every woman out there and every man out there who supports us, and every person who's a person of color, and every person who supports people of color. We have one thing to do, and it's vote. You know, we've marched and marched and marched, and well, we should have. We've called people, and well, we should have. We've spoken out. We've done a lot. We need to vote like never before, because I hate to say this, and maybe people don't agree, but we have to win big. We just have to, because they'll try to take it away from us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our students want to know also a little bit about inside party politics. These are two questions I'll combine. One is, do you think there's a generational divide inside the Democratic Party? And the second, who, in the case that that Representative Pelosi, as Speaker in the House, in the case that she steps down, who might you guess would be replacing her in her position, assuming that Democrats retain control of the House?
I hate to say it, it's a hot potato question, but it's really one for our esteemed guest.
Well, a generational divide, I don't think there is a generational divide. I think there's ideological differences. Because if you say generational divide, you're basing it on age. And I don't think that's where the differences are. I think the differences are on ideology. But I don't think it is that, I don't think it is that negative. So for example, everybody thought when the squad was elected that it was going to be really disruptive and they were going to just create havoc, and that's just not the case. I mean, you know, their politics are more to the left, and that's just fine. The thing about the Democratic Party that I think is profoundly different than the Republican Party, we are diverse in every way. We're diverse in terms of our ethnic background, our gender, and our politics. And I think that's fine. I mean, what you find in the Republican Party is a party, I think, that has been taken over by an extremist element. And so you have this divide now, which I'm loving, the Lincoln Project, and all of the Republicans against Trump. But I do think that after the Trump era is over, I won't be surprised if they don't try to make the party be more like it was before. Maybe not completely, but not run by an extremist element. And in terms of Speaker Pelosi, I don't know. I mean, Speaker Pelosi has been there for a while, and she is just an incredibly effective leader. And what people really need to understand is that the only reason our government is functioning today is because of her. Is because Mitch McConnell, basically, he's not the head of the Senate anymore. I call him a staffer for Trump because he's abdicated his responsibility. That's why the speaker negotiates the HEROES Act and the COVID relief. She just negotiates with Mnuchin. And McConnell is, you know, doesn't seem to be very relevant.
Yeah, I have to just say, that was such a great answer, the whole thing, because the ideological split, you can't say it's generational. Look at Bernie, right?
Right.
Bernie and AOC. So, you know, it's really, you're so right on point. But I also have to say, Nancy is definitely a sister to me. And I came up with Nancy. And I just want to say, what a remarkable person. I know the House, and it's very obstreperous, right? It's very diverse in the caucus, right? There's a caucus for everything.
Yeah.
I know, because I founded a couple of them.
Yes.
You've got a caucus if you have one blue eye and one brown eye. You know, everybody's found a caucus, you know, a caucus for manufacturing, a caucus for what? Solar or whatever it is, it's there. And to be a leader who can, you know, manage to keep people unified. That's a remarkable quality she has. She's going to go down in history, I believe, as the greatest of all time. And I served with Tip O'Neill. I adored him. But it was a lot easier for Tip because he had this humongous advantage and he never was in the minority. She's gone through being the minority leader, being the speaker, remarkable person. And, I can't say enough about her leadership.
Well, this has just been fantastic. Seems like we're at the top of the hour now. Thank you so much to the students for all your amazing questions. I'm going to turn it back to Senator Boxer for closing remarks now.
Yes. Well, first I'd ask Karen, would you like to make a couple of closing remarks? Because I can do mine very, very quickly. So would you like to say something to the students?
Sure. Let me just say, first of all, that it is an honor to be here with you. It is an honor to be alongside my senator, who I looked up to for many, many years and remember going and meeting with you. I remember exactly where we were when we went and met over the crisis in California, and your leadership and the mark that you left on history is huge. And just for everybody that's watching, we should all feel a responsibility. Voting is just step one. It's something you must do. But after you vote, you must stay involved, because you can't just say, I voted for somebody and now I expect for them to do everything I want, but I never talk to them or interact with them. And so you have to be involved. And this is just such a critical time in our life. This election is a matter of life and death. That's what I have to say. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I am so excited you accepted this. Berkeley is such a wonderful place, and we're so excited that we had you. And to the students, thank you for doing this with me again. And I guess my closing remarks are that you are the future. It sounds like, well, that's everyone says that, but you are. And the fact that you cared enough to listen to us today and meet someone as extraordinary as Karen Bass, this is a very special person. The whole idea of the Boxer Lecture is to feature people, women like Karen Bass. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you did. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Senator Boxer and Representative Bass, and really terrific discussion. And I'll be drawing on some of these ideas when I teach my Congress class this spring. And so just thank you so much. Also want to thank the IGS staff for their tremendous work making this virtual event possible. Sonia Montezuma, Christine Trost, and Kelly Jones did a terrific job. Also, thanks to Nicole Barak of the Senator Boxer's staff. And again, I just want to thank the audience for your participation and questions, and invite you to visit the IGS homepage where you can join our mailing list to receive announcements about our future events. Thank you very much.